Rent to own can be a great, more affordable way to get into a home, especially with interest rates as volatile as they are right now. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows. There are some very big, serious downsides that you need to consider. So let me walk you through what those are and how you can avoid them. So let's jump into it. Hey, what's up guys? I'm Ben Sun. Welcome to my channel. If you've been here before, welcome back. If this is your first time, welcome for the first time. I don't just cover the disastrous downsides of home ownership. I also talk about improving our overall financial health through things like personal finance, investing, and real estate. So if that interests you, you gotta hit that big red subscribe button so you're in on what's next. As I said a second ago, rent to own is a great way to get into a house. And I've covered these more in detail, like a more comprehensive overview of what rent to own is and how to do that. And you can check that out in my rent to own playlist. But in this video, I'm gonna focus more on the downsides because buying a home is a big decision and mistakes can be extremely costly, but they can be avoided. And so the first downside is that rent to own can be more expensive per month than having a mortgage or just normal renting. Let me explain. And now keep in mind that a lot of these things are negotiable, but I'm gonna speak in more broad terms here because it's gonna apply to more people. Rent to own can be more expensive per month because you generally pay a market rent like you would if you were just renting the home, but then you also pay more every month to pay down the principal or the remaining balance. That way at the end you have a lesser mortgage. Now this is effectively still your money because at the end you just would end up with a lesser mortgage. But if for some reason you don't go through with the contract, then you lose that money. It just means that you paid more for rent every month. And so a good solution here is to make sure that you negotiate how much you're paying in rent and how much of that rent is going towards the principal each month. Now, another downside, and it can make rent to own more expensive than renting, is who pays for the maintenance or repairs or upkeep. Generally, when you're renting, you call a landlord up and they come and repair your stuff and you're good to go. But on rent to own, the house is yours, so you could be responsible for that. But it's not actually yours because you haven't actually paid for it. So you get into this weird area where you might be paying and maintaining a house that's not actually yours yet. You could be putting money into it, and then at the end, you don't actually get the home for whatever reason. There's a lot of different reasons. And so you paid to maintain a home that's not yours, which costs you money in the end, and it costs you money each month. And so again, like I said earlier, everything can kind of be negotiated, and you're probably gonna have to pay for certain things, but you can negotiate like bigger things like roofs would still be the seller's responsibility because they're legally the owner still. Another solution is that you get a home inspection. This isn't gonna guarantee that you get a perfect home or that nothing through the contract is ever gonna go wrong, but it's going to provide you with good insight on what might go wrong or what could be going wrong with the home. And they're like 400 bucks. So it's generally worth it for you to pay that $400 to get one so you know what's going on. Now, the third downside, and this is kind of a tricky one, is that your home price is generally locked in, but your interest rate, because you don't have a mortgage yet, is not locked in. Now, the home price being locked in can be an upside as well, because if home prices go up, and they usually do over a certain amount of time, then you could be getting a pretty good deal on the home. But if the home prices go down, then you could be paying more for a home than what the home is actually worth. And when I said that the interest rate's not locked in, you get a mortgage at the end of the contract, so you're not locking in an interest rate yet. So if interest rates continue to rise, you could be paying more in interest for the mortgage than if you would have just gotten a mortgage originally. Now, this is generally not that big of a deal. A lot of people think it's a bigger deal than what it is because interest rates fluctuate over time, and there's going to be a chance in your home ownership where you can refinance to a lower interest rate and lower the payment. You can also make extra principal payments once you actually get your mortgage, once you close on the contract. You can make like extra principal payments once a year, and that's going to drastically cut down not only the term of your mortgage, but how much interest rate or how much interest you've paid over time. So those were a couple of the basic ones. Let's get into some more serious things that could greatly put your money in your financial position in jeopardy. And that brings us to number 4, and that's there's no guarantee that you're going to get financing at the end of the contract. So you're going to want to make sure that you're talking to a lender even though you know that you're not going to get a mortgage right away. You want to talk to a lender to make sure that you understand their requirements so that when the contract expires in say the 1 to 3 years, when that contract expires, you're better aligned with their requirements and you know ahead of time that you're going to meet those. So if, let's say, you have a 500 credit score and they require a 640 credit score, you have to make sure that you're doing whatever you can to get your credit score up so that you know you qualify. But if you went the 2 or 3 years and didn't understand what their requirements were, you could find yourself in a bad position and potentially lose the house and all money you've put into the house. And as a lender, I've seen some heartbreaking and costly mistakes at the other side of this, where, you know, a customer comes to you and they don't qualify for whatever reason, and then they end up losing the house. You don't want to find yourself in that position, so it's important to have those conversations ahead of time. And the fifth downside is that missed payments can completely void the contract. So if you're well acquainted with missed payments or consistently having to ask for an extension, rent to own is not going to be the route that you're going to want to go. You could potentially forfeit the home and any money that you had into the home, and it could hurt your potential to get a mortgage later on. So you really want to treat the payment like you absolutely have to make it. Again, the seller can void your contract, and it's a really costly mistake. It's not like just paying rent late. It's like paying a mortgage or a car or something like that late. I got 2 more for you guys, and the next one is scams. Unfortunately, like everything else nowadays, it seems like, scams are rampant in the rent-to-own space. Most of them are pretty easily sought out. I mean, they're not super sophisticated, but some of them actually are pretty sophisticated, and they could cost you thousands of dollars if you don't catch on. So one of the most common scams is they make a fake listing and then they try to get your personal information before ever meeting you or showing you a house, and they're never gonna meet you or show you a house because it's a fake listing. So don't give any of your personal information out ahead of time. You want to make sure that you're meeting the seller, seeing the home, vetting everything that you need to vet before giving out any of your personal information. And really, for a lot of these deals, you don't actually need to give the seller very much of your personal information. They may ask for things like proof of deposits if you've agreed on giving them a deposit. But you can go to the bank and get something without like your social security number or any like huge personal information to be able to prove that. Now, there are some more sophisticated scams, and that can involve real sellers and real listings, but if the listing looks too low for like the market rent in the area, meaning you can go on Zillow and see how much the market rent in that area should be. If you see a listing that's kind of drastically lower for the home, they could have you sign a contract and then charge you that rent, but never actually apply any of it to the principal. So once you're at the end of the contract, if you don't catch this, you haven't paid down on anything and you might be obligated to buy the home. Another scam is that they might not actually own the home, or they might own the home, but they don't have full permission to sell the home, meaning there could be like another owner or brother and sister or something like that that hasn't actually given them the authority or the full authority to sell. And so you could end up at the end of the contract, find out that there's actually more owners on the home and that you don't actually have a right to buy that house. And these can be a lot harder to vet out. So it's important that you consider contacting a real estate attorney that can go over the contract or be a part of these negotiations before you actually sign the contract. Sometimes if you just need them to vet the contract or talk to the seller, it might not be that expensive. If you want them to get involved in the negotiation, then it does get a little bit more expensive. There are also services, like rent-to-own services that you can sign up for that help vet the seller and you to make the deal a little bit more smooth. But generally, there are downsides to those sites because they can be a little bit more expensive, but it might be worth it on the back end. Now, the 7th downside, and probably one of the hardest downsides to actually vet, is that you can be exposed to the seller's finances or lack of finances. Meaning if they don't pay their mortgage or property taxes on time, or if they didn't pay a contractor and one of those entities have a lien on the property, then that lien becomes first position, meaning they get paid before you do, or they get paid before you become an owner on the house. So if the seller stops paying his mortgage or stops paying the property taxes, they put a lien on the house and you have to pay them before you can become an owner. And if they foreclose on the seller, then you lose all rights to the property and your money. They're effectively foreclosing on you as well. And so it basically negates the contract, or you have to sue the seller, and if they don't have any money, it becomes a long drawn out headache thing. And so obviously you want to do your due diligence on the seller ahead of time. If you're in serious negotiation with them and both parties are serious, then one, they should be able to provide proof that they own the home. You can get proof through a title company or something like that. You can usually, in most states, they have like a public tax record where you can look at who owns each house if you have the address, and you can look to see if taxes are paid up on time. Again, it varies state by state what resources you would use. Usually it's the county website. And two, you want to make sure that they're in good standing with their mortgage company or any liens that they have out on the house. Again, a real estate attorney or the title company can help you vet this information, but if you sign the contract and then they stop paying, this is where it gets really hard to vet, because they could have a really good standing and then for whatever reason they stop paying, or there's a miscommunication between you and them and they think that you owe the property taxes, not them. That could put a lien on the house, potentially put you into foreclosure, and set this whole thing in motion where you end up losing the house and any money that you have associated with it. And frankly, if the seller is a reputable seller, I would ask them to split the cost for some of this, because it's going to protect them as well. And guys, I'm not doing this video to scare you. Rent to own can be a great way to get into a home, and it can be a great way to buy a rental property and start producing an income. And they're quite common, but there are risks that need to be recognized. If you want to find out more about rent to own, check out this next video.